piece of M.D.F board that I'm going to seal and paint. On this side I'm going to use an oil based paint to seal this, and on this side I'll use a water based paint. I've divided this up because this piece I'm going to lightly sand first, and this piece I'll lightly sand, leaving these two. Generally when you feel M.D.F, it's slightly rough, overall smooth, but it has that bit of a roughness to it. Any furred edges where it's been cut, by using a piece of worn 180 grade sandpaper, something that's been used, just lightly rub over the end. That'll help. When you prime it, it'll seal the surface and harden it up a bit, and you'll be able to smooth it off even more. So, starting with this one, again, just lightly rubbing it over. Any really sharp edges, you can run the sandpaper over it, just to take that complete sharp edge off. The paint will sit easier. Anywhere where any screws are, just give it a light sand around, just make sure they're nice and smooth. I'm leaving that one. Finish sanding, give it a dust off. Okay, first up, so this is a water-based one. This is a multi-surface primer undercoat, interior, exterior. I've thinned it off, quite thin. Only got a small amount there, but I do want it to be thin. Just make sure that's clean. Okay, so I've got the screws there. Okay, and it's not necessarily about getting the opacity now. This is about sealing the MDF. Okay, so leave that one to dry. Get the oil on. So with the oil one, I've got some old paint with bits of skin in it, but there's enough in there for what I want to do. So a piece of stocking and some masking tape. I'll sort this out, filter it, and we'll get it on there. I'll add a touch of white spirit to this, Well, I'm using a bit of recycled white spirit. I don't need a lot. Get this filtered. Oh, this is quite thin, which is just what I want. I don't need a lot. I will be able to scrub this out. Okay, I can leave that now. Don't want to leave any thick edges to it. So I've coated this up, wiped the stuff away, and in the time of doing all that, this is already touch dry. So maybe slightly wet around the screw holes. So this would probably leave another hour. This is going to be left overnight. I'll leave it all. Take a look at these now that these are dry. So straight away you can see that the oil undercoat is a lot flatter. So the water-based primer undercoat struggles to get in even though you thin it. So now the screws, they've not rusted, so obviously these must be sort of Sheridized anti-rust. because the water-based paint would have rusted them. So that's one thing to look out for when you're doing something like this. So now the ones that are sanded, then generally they're a lot smoother than the ones that haven't been. Although they've lifted the fibre of the paper pulp, which your primers will, then overall any bigger lumps it's took off, which technically is crucial for the next stage, because before you do any filling you need to give these a light key. Also it will be denibbing, so I'll sand the whole lot now, but these areas may take a little bit more. It is only light. Also, if you're ever doing any marking with this, use a pencil. You'll notice where the lines have come through. I used ink deliberately so I could define where I've been, but it will always bleed through. That's both the undercoats sanded. Okay, dust off. Okay, and straight away these two are nice and smooth. This is quite grainy. Like I say, that primer undercoat, the water-based one, doesn't want to soak in the same. So I'll give it a bit more flattening down, and then I'm ready for my next stage. Okay, that's not too bad. Took a bit more sanding, but dust off. Next step, I just want to run some decorator's cork straight along here, making sure it makes contact with the board. I'm sort of forcing it onto the board. Right, so now I can leave this to dry. Prep this while that cork's drying, and then I'll fill the holes when I fill these holes on this joint. Again, I'll have a bit of a gap running up the edges here where the beading is. So, same process. I'm just going to rub the surface down lightly, any of these edges, and just near this joint. Also, where any pins have gone in, just give those a check over, because the M.D.F may be slightly distorted, expanded. Treating it as if there is a grain. Just where the pins are on the bead. And then with any panels, again, following the grain. These are never level. They're a lot harder than wood to get smooth. Some filling may be required just to blend them in, but generally a light rub will take away the worst of it. Following the edge of that. Always working up. Okay, dust off. Got some water-based primer, same primer undercoat, just because it'll dry quicker for me. So starting with the panels and just working slightly onto the beading. I don't want to come onto this face yet. Like I say, I've slightly thinned this just to give me a bit more working time with it. Working away from that bead. Like I say, this is a wooden bead, so it's going to behave slightly differently absorbing this than the M.D.F. So just wipe back anything there, keeping off this face. Making sure I'm coating the edge of the beading, because I don't want to come back onto these panels. Working the central part first, bringing the beading in, just working up to that edge. When you're applying this, you're always looking for the thicker edges and just laying them off, knocking them back. Like I said, the idea of the primer is to soak into that MDF, seal it. If there's too much on the brush, just wipe it back. Onto the panels at the top. I'll just leave that to dry. Remembering that this is only a primer, as long as you get those brush marks out, it doesn't necessarily matter how it looks at this stage, just as long as all your brush strokes are in the same direction, i.e. following any grain. Again, dry. Now I can concentrate on flattening this off and getting it nice and smooth. The primer or sealer has done its job. Harden this off. Prep has been done on this now. Smoother. So now I can mix a hard stop and fill any holes on these joints. Because theoretically, when these are made up, then they're glued as well as pinned, so there should be no movement. It's satin I'm using, water-based paint. So the colour I'll be mixing with the filler. I've mixed my hard stop and just used my polyfiller. So, working with a damp cloth as well, I'll start to fill these holes and then get this lot filled in. Forcing it into the hole. Wipe a little bit away from around those edges so it's easier to come off. on the oil. Not going near the hole. Actually, I did just then. Just less sanding. Okay, concentrate on these. Now, small pinholes. I'll just use my putty knife, just force them in. Just wipe any thicker edges off. Okay, so with the damp cloth, just wipe these off. Now I need to fill these joints and this edge along this joint. Making sure force it into that gap. Clear that edge. Right, now I can just start to fill these joints. Anything that needs filling on that mitre, fill that. Wipe it back with a damp cloth. I'll just save a bit of sanding and just proceed to carry on with the rest. Allow the first fill to dry, a light sand, and then give it a second fill. These are ready for the final fill. You can see how the oil has generally withstood the sanding better than this water base this side. So just wet that blade. Get these filled. So this has been sanded down, just this piece of bead to do. Again, always working with the grain. Although this is M.D.F, treat it like wood. Just always follow that grain. These are both ready for the first coat of paint. I'll start with this one first. So oil base working through to the water base. I'll just coat the whole lot up in one. I'll lay the paint on this way, so that's how I will finish it. Soaking into that water-based paint a lot quicker. Creating drag. Right. Leave that, put it to one side, let it dry, get the other one done. Starting with the panels again first, and the bead. Again, I want to try and stay off this face. Mainly because it's water-based paint. And it'll just dry a lot quicker. Rub it out if you do go on that face. I've only a small bit here to do, so I want to start to work this all in now. Any sharp edges, never try and draw back, always just either work along or just away from it, but then just lay off. Coming up to these ends, don't want to stray over too much. Working up to there. I'll let that dry. Make sure there's no thick edges, just lay it all in the same direction as the grain. Just let that dry. I'm just keying this now with 180 again, just ready for its second coat. So this side where the oil-based primer is, undercoat, a lot smoother already. I've not keyed this yet. And then where I did the filling, that's okay, hidden. So I'll just get this keyed up. Starting with this one again, get it coated up. Now with this, again, starting with the panels, but this time I don't mind if I go onto this face. I'm going to wipe it back. Because now that this has had one coat of the satin wood, this is wipeable. Whereas that primer underneath wasn't. Doesn't resist the wiping the same. So this is generally how you would do your panels now. Bringing in that bead and then bring in the panel. I'll leave that to dry. I'll dry again. Well, this is the oil end. Well, by far a lot smoother. Not too bad this end, but a little bit ropey. By far it is the quickest way, but you can get better results using the oil based as a primer. And some of the main reasons are, when you're wiping back and sanding, this will resist a lot more. So I've got a cloth, a damp cloth here. I'm just going to rub at this undercoat. Obviously it's not going to work up, whereas this, see how it's starting to come off there. So even though I thinned it off, it's still wanting to lift off. Now some water-based primers are a lot better than this. They will resist. They'll be a bit more like this undercoat. So then when you apply your cork over something like this, then the cork will wet it, so then this has a chance of lifting off, especially with pre-primed M.D.F. Some of the primers are very much like this. Like I say, there are water-based primers that are a lot tougher. So what I will do now is just remove this cork. Now it's not going to be completely dry, but it should be dry enough for me to start to remove it. I shouldn't get it on my fingers, maybe a little bit on the thicker areas, because it doesn't really dry that quick, this stuff. So it is fairly dry, it's not getting on my finger, not working up the same, but that has stuck to that undercoat there. So yeah, it has stuck. With the oil based and the water based, once the medium has evaporated, dried off, then the pigments and binders are left. So then there's no reason why you shouldn't be able to use water based paints or corks on top of the oil undercoat or primer. Some wood primers can stay quite tacky, so use something that would want to dry quite hard. So this is an interior undercoat. Anyway, I'll just start to remove this. You can see how it's leaving the undercoat on. So it's binded to the surface there. As we hit this, we should start to reveal some of the M.D.F. Oh, it's only slightly. A little bit more there. Probably not fully cured, fully bonded to it, but it did take a little bit off there. Oh yeah, it will lift it off. So again, that could be a problem when you're caulking joints. So anywhere where there's a joint and you use your caulk, it could start to lift. So that is why really the preferred method is using the undercoat underneath. Just overall you get a better result. Bit rushed, but overall not too bad. Now this again isn't necessarily my preferred method, so the oil base will resist that wiping of any filler, any cork.